Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and this week I'm going to be doing something new. I'm going to be doing a video each of the weekdays of this week in support of someone else's channel. Since I've been here on YouTube, I've discovered a whole community of cool YouTubers who are doing all sorts of interesting and fun comic book content. A lot of those people have supported me, and I wanted to do something, a little bit something to give back. I was inspired in part to do this by the channel of Metarog, and so as a result, today the first channel video I'm going to be doing is a support of Metarog and his friends and some of the things they're doing. If you haven't visited Metarog's channel, I highly recommend doing it. He does a great thing every week where he highlights other YouTube channels and other comic book content creators here on YouTube, particularly ones that are doing contests, and he provides links to all of their channels and the details about the different contests that they're running. So it's a great community service, and it's a great hub, his channel that he's created there to bring everyone together and then send everyone back out to support each other and see all this cool new content that you may not have been aware of. So what I've done is I've watched those videos. I've picked a few contests that are currently running. A lot of them they have different entry rules, but some of them involve making videos like this one. So I'm going to try and do ones that specifically instruct you to make certain types of videos to support them because it's YouTube and making videos is what we're all about. So they happen to be running right now, Metarog and his friends, their own contest. Now, for the most part, the other contests are sort of to win comics and stuff, and I don't really care so much about that. It would be cool and whatever. But I really am doing this because I just want to support the community. But Metarog is running a contest that I really actually kind of do want to win. And that's because he and some of the other creators that he works with, they have a thing called Graders Notes, where every 2 weeks they do a live stream where they take an individual issue and they'll go over it and break it down and discuss the merits of it. They talk about the cover, the great things on a scale of 1 to 5, and they'll talk about the cover, they'll talk about the art, the story, the overall concept, and then a grade for the book as in toto, like as a whole, when you take everything into consideration on a scale of 1 to 5, how good it is. And they debate these, and the video, they're very in-depth. Some of these are over 2 hours long, and as anyone who's watched my channel knows, there's nothing I love more than to just talk on and on and on about issues that get me fired up. So I would love to make an appearance on that channel and just ramble about comics, because that is what I love to do more than just about anything. And as a bonus, if they choose me to be on the show, I'll get to pick the comic. And I have a great choice in mind. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I don't want to sway the internal voting in Metarog's group when they decide the winner of this. But I have a comic that I'm a big fan of, and I love to go over it. Now, just because I'm a fan of a comic, though, doesn't mean that it's actually good. As anyone who has seen my video on my top 25 least key books in my collection knows, I have a soft spot for comics that are amateurish, weird, bad, or just strange. So just because I really like a comic doesn't mean it's actually good. So no spoilers, but if I get picked for that, you'll get to see me on that channel. But even if you don't, I certainly recommend going. I've included in the links below the links to all the different members of the Graders Notes group, so you can go and you can watch their individual content, and you can also watch the Graders Notes. Like and subscribe to them, particularly to Metarog. He's doing some great stuff over there. I'm about to get into my review, so what they want me to do to enter their contest is to basically pick a comic from my collection here and do my own Graders Notes on this individual issue. I'll be doing it solo. They usually also, as part of their live stream, they'll invite the people watching live to give their own scores on things. I'm not doing this as a live stream, but please feel free to, in the comments below, give me what your scores are. I'll be showing you samples of everything as we go through this issue. So let me know what you think below, and I'll get into that momentarily. Before I do that, I also just wanted to mention a little bit more about Metarog and his channel. I'm new to YouTube, but I've actually encountered Metarog on a few different forums. The forum I'm most active on is the Classic Comics forum, but also I'm active on the CGC forum as well, both under the name Crime Buster. And I also had the fortune of interacting some with Metarog back in the old CBR Classic Comics subforum before they nuked that in 2014. And he's a really cool guy. He's particularly a great resource for comics that have weird variants. He's sort of an expert on the variant stuff. So if you're interested in that, please check out his channel. One of the high points of my commenting life on the internet was the day I actually managed to stump Metarog with a variant that even he had never seen before. And I've never seen one since, although I have to say I haven't really been looking for it too hard since I already have one. And I thought I'd show that off here. It is Archie number 401. You'd be hard-pressed to figure that out by looking at the cover because there's actually no issue number on it. And you'll notice there's no price on it either. That's because this is actually a complimentary copy that was specifically printed for and distributed at ClubMed, of all things. I have to guess there probably aren't a lot of these floating around, since you can only get these if you were on vacation at ClubMed around this time period, which is 1992. I'm guessing they didn't print very many, and the ones they did print, some kid that was probably bored to tears because they were stuck at ClubMed picked up a few of these, and however many of those survived, I don't know. So I can't imagine they're very common. I've never run into them anywhere else. I just happened to get this one. So there's my contribution to the variant universe. Don't know anything else about it, but luckily it's printed right on the front that where it came from, ClubMed complimentary copy. That's Archie number 401. So if you're interested in variant stuff, check out Metarog's videos. He's got all sorts of cool stuff on there. And now let's get right into the meat of it, my grader's notes. And so for my video here, I have chosen as my comic to look through and give the grading notes on it. It's Adventure Comics number 427. So this is from a really short-lived and very overlooked era in Adventure Comics. Of course, Adventure had been featuring Superboy for many years, and then starting with issue 381, Supergirl took over as the lead in Adventure Comics, and she stayed as the lead in Adventure Comics from issues 381 up till 424. At that point, Supergirl spun off and got her own title. And so what they did starting with issue 425 is they actually switched Adventure Comics back to its original format, which is adventure stories. That lasted 3 issues. So the 3 issues with the adventure format are 425, 426, and 427. Starting with the next issue, there's a 3-part Black Orchid storyline, and then after that, the Spectre takes over famously in issue 431, and then following that, it's Aquaman. But there's this brief little window here where they went back to the original format, and that also involved bringing back the original classic logo. So let's take a look at the cover. I'm going to start with my score for the cover, and I think this is it's by Luis Dominguez. It's a great, moody, sort of sketchy cover here. This photographer is photographing these little weird lizard monsters, and he's sort of like surprised and horrified at what he's seeing because they're so strange, and he doesn't realize he's about to get eaten by the mama monster. I think this is a really cool image. Even more, though, is this might be my favorite logo in all of comics. I should do a whole video just about logos because I love logos. I've got a coming up here. I've already recorded, but it hasn't aired yet. I've got a a new long box archaeology video where I dive into a box of stuff that includes a number of issues of Unexpected. And that's a title where I just loved the title and the logo so much that I actually at one point put together like a 50 issue collection of it. And I don't actually really read horror comics very much. I was just buying it for the logo, but this is even better. And just having the big adventure logo, it's very rare. They did keep this through the Spectre issues, but that's about it. So you have this very brief window for a couple years where they went back to the original adventure logo. And here it's got this beautiful yellow and the classic font for the word comics, but also it's got the semi-frame. I know not everyone loves frames or semi-frames. For me, I love them. And it's also the double bullet era. At the beginning of the double bullet, later on these got more and more cluttered as they started putting all this extra type and stuff in them. But this is near the beginning of the double bullet. It's got the frame. It's got the best logo of all time, the Adventure Comics logo. I would pretty much buy any comic that has this logo. And so when you combine those elements, the beautiful colors with this, the great evocative art here by Luis Dominguez, I will have this cover at a 4.5. The only thing that keeps me from giving it a higher grade is that there's a very, very similar design for 2 issues previously, 425, but that cover is by Mike Kaluta, and that's actually even better than this one. And so as a result, I know that this isn't as good as it can get because I've seen better in this run. So as much as I love this, I'm gonna give it a slight downgrade when compared to the Kaluta cover. But so the cover here we get a 4.5. So this is an anthology, so there's actually 3 different stories in here. I'm going to go over all of them, and then I'll give you my grades for each. I'll give you my grades for each as we go through them, and then I'll give you the totals for all the different topics. The first one is called Adventurers Club, featuring Strong, the chairman of the club, which is a guy with a cool mustache and an eye patch. Adventurers Club started in the previous issue, only ran for a couple issues here, but the conceit behind Adventurers Club is that there's an Adventurers Club, and in order to get in the club, you have to have a story about some crazy adventure that you were on. So he's basically a framing device where he's interviewing someone here. We can see on the splash page here, there's someone in that chair, and he's interviewing the person in the chair about the story. It's kind of an odd design where we just see the back of a chair, but there's a reason for that. This story is written by John Albano and with art by Jim Aparo. And basically what happens in this story is this guy is a photographer. It's the guy from the cover. This is the cover story. And he sets up all of these incidents, like this one here where you see some people being mauled by lions. He sets these incidents up because he's filming all these people being killed and mauled in the wild because he thinks it's exciting footage. The guy's basically a complete sociopath, and he gets several people killed or maimed or otherwise injured. And eventually, one of the tribespeople there leads them into the jungle where they witness this weird rite where there's a tribe of people and they have this woman who is staked to the ground, and they summon this giant lizard monster out of the wild, which is like a huge crocodile thing. And basically the idea is if the crocodile attacks her, then she's not fit. But if the crocodile doesn't attack, then the gods have shown that she's worthy of being the chief's wife. Well, the lizard doesn't attack, and that really upsets the cameraman because he wanted the exciting footage. But he gets so bummed out he leaves his camera behind, and then when he goes back to get stuff, he basically passes out from exhaustion, and when he wakes up, he's lying on the ground, and he's being attacked by the baby lizards. And then we get the kicker of the story. He's telling a story, and the lizards have a voodoo curse and they turn him into a lizard guy. The end. Okay, so there's story one. I'll just give my grades on this story, and then we'll move on to the next one. So for art, the art gets a solid 4. I'm giving this a 4. Jim Aparo is fantastic. He's doing the full art here, so it's his own inks. The only reason that I'm knocking it down really from a 5 is because of things like this, where because of the story, he's got to have these like weird panel designs where you can't really see what's going on because they're trying to keep the suspense going. And it's a little awkward. It's a little forced. He's doing his best. But other than that, it's just really tremendous artwork. The story, on the other hand, I've got issues with the story. I'm going to give the story a 2.5. I might be a little generous on this, actually. I maybe should only give it a 2, but I'm going to give it a 2.5. Here's the problem I have with it. The first several pages are this guy being a complete sociopath and getting people murdered and stuff. And then he, goes into the jungle and has this encounter and comes back as a lizard person. None of the stuff he does in the first several pages of setup actually has anything to do with the plot. All it does is really establish that he's a jerk who deserves what he gets later on, but there's no plot connection between those events and the payoff. Because he ends up, he gets heat exhaustion from wandering the jungle, passes out, and then the lizards, find him. That could have happened on page 1, without any of the setup. A guy passes out, magic lizards bite him. And so I felt like there was a lot of, teases for stuff that actually didn't end up connecting. There were sort of unrelated incidents. I like my plotting to be tighter. If you're going to set stuff up at the beginning, he pays a guy to cliff dive and the guy dies, and then he sets up the incident where his own boss gets mauled and that puts him in charge of the expedition. I thought those were going somewhere. They weren't. They didn't go anywhere. So to me, that's a negative. They don't have much room to work with here, so I'm giving them a little bit of leeway because of that. That's why I'm giving it a 2.5 instead of a 2, because they really only have like 6 or 7 pages to work with. So there's a lot of limitations on space. Maybe if this had been fleshed out, it would have been better. But yeah, it's just a little disjointed for me. Let's move on to the second story. Well, actually, the concept of the Adventurers Club, I like as a framing story. I'm going to give the Adventurers Club concept itself a 3.5. Again, as a framing story, the problem is that we have our character Strong. He's our recurring character. He doesn't actually participate in the stories. He's just a guy that's listening. He's basically the reader. And so that's something where it makes it a little bit more difficult to really invest in it as a series, because we don't care that much about the guy. Also, he's interviewing people who want to get into the Adventurers Club, and we don't really get his reaction to this story. Does he think this guy's a jerk? Does this guy still get in because he has a crazy story, even though he's a clear, psycho? Does he still get in? Are all the adventurers just complete psychopaths, but that's totally fine as long as you're into adventure? I don't know. We don't really get his reaction to this. There's no sort of judgment on his part, and so he's just sort of a cipher. So I still like the concept. It's just it doesn't go as far as it should. So second story, it's the Vigilante. It's Vigilante. Now, Vigilante's had a few different versions. This is the version where he's riding a motorcycle, and he's got the cowboy hat. He's basically dressed like the Old West Vigilante, as we can see here in this panel. But he rides a motorcycle, doesn't have any superpowers. He's just, he's a vigilante. He's like Batman. If Batman a Old West cosplayer. You know, like if Batman were in his mansion and instead of a bat coming through the window, it was like the Lone Ranger. That's basically what happens here. So anyway, Vigilante. This story's pretty simple, but it's got a lot packed into it. There's a movie. They're filming a Western at the beginning, and the star shoots one of the extras and kills him because his blanks have been replaced by real bullets. This is a very common trope in stories where the blanks get replaced by real bullets. And it turns out that he had been up on charges a few years ago, and the guy that he killed is actually the witness against him. So, you know, there's a lot of like drama packed into this. And the upshot is that the director actually framed the guy to get heat off of himself because he's actually using the movie production as a front for a ring that's smuggling stolen diamonds. And this is all in like 6 pages. And so we get a lot of action where we get this cool juxtaposition here where it's modern on the movie set, but the movie is an old Western. So it's a cool, actually sort of meta stage for Vigilante to be operating in, because he is sort of an old Western hero, but with a modern slant where instead of riding a horse, he's riding an iron horse. So I really liked that aspect of it. Again, it was constrained for space because a lot of the plot ends up being stuffed into word balloons, where we just get like these data dumps over and over to fill you in on this big plot that takes place in a short amount of space. And so that makes it feel very, very tight. The art here is by Mike Sikowski. And it's being inked, my understanding is, by Dick Giordano. I don't actually see the credits in this one. The other 2 stories have credits. I don't see them here, but from looking online, and the story was by Carrie Bates. So you can see the Sikowski-ness of it all, right down to the hand-done logo. Sikowski is an acquired taste, let's say, but he is a taste that I have acquired. So I like Sikowski's work. I certainly understand people that don't, but I like his Bronze Age artwork, even though it gets very sketchy and idiosyncratic to the point sometimes of almost being ugly. I'm into it. I'm a Sikowski fan. So for me, this art gets a solid 4. Now, in terms of the story, I'm going to give it, let's say, a 3.5. Better than the first one, I think. There's more of a payoff. There's more plot. The plotting is much tighter, but again, too constrained. As far as the concept for Vigilante, I've always found Vigilante to be really boring. And it's basically exactly what I said earlier. It's a Western hero, but in modern times. And no, it just doesn't do anything for me. Sorry if there's fans of Vigilante out there. I don't really get it. He's basically like if you take the Ghost Rider and removed everything interesting about him. So for me, the concept is just a 2. I also, just the look with the bandana is a look that I've never liked. You know, like Grifter from Wildcats or whatever. I just think that looks dumb. So I don't like Vigilante. We're giving the concept a 2. Yeah, sorry. And then finally we get Captain Fear. Script by Steve Skeets and art by Alex Nino. Here's a look at the splash page. Now, this is an ongoing serial. Captain Fear is a guy, and I forget the details because it's not really told in here. It jumps right into the action. No recap of what happened in the previous 2 issues. So you're just on your own, which is particularly weird considering this was bi-monthly. So relying on people to have even seen the last issue, much less remember what happened, is a little bit of a stretch. I think there should be some recap, and there isn't any, not even in the dialogue. But basically, Captain Fear is a guy who is like a Native American or something, Again, no recap. But he's also the captain of this ship that apparently is, I guess, in the Caribbean. Anyway, there's a woman involved, and she has him at the beginning. She's got him at gunpoint. This is a carryover again from last issue. And she's like, another ship attacks, and it's like, oh, that's my father, come to rescue me. And then there's a battle, and the captain, instead of killing Captain Fear, captures him for some reason and ties him up. And then the woman frees him and is like, I can't let my father treat you like this. You saved me from those pirates, previous issue. And so she frees him, and he goes on deck and gets a sword fight with the father and kills him. But then, twist, the woman shows up, and she's like, she says, he wasn't actually my father. The people on the ship don't know this either. That's why they're treating me well, because they think I'm his daughter. But actually, I was his slave that he purchased. Okay, Steve. And so she's like, now the crew doesn't know this. So now that he's dead, I'm going to take over as the captain, and I want you to be my second in command. And he is like, sayonara, sucker. And he just jumps over the side because he says that he'll never take orders from anyone, least of all her. And then she's like, she vows vengeance on him. So I kind of liked their interplay here, because if you're Captain Fear, his reaction's completely understandable. He's just seen her lie and double cross multiple times. Why would he then trust her? She freed him specifically, he realizes, to kill the guy so that she would be free to take over the ship and be free of bondage. And so he's like, no. I mean, plus he is Captain Fear. He's not, Lieutenant Fear. He can't really be second in command, or else there's no strip. But I do like this in terms of setting this up for a future interplay later on once he gets the ship back. I can see the story possibilities here. I have to say, I'm not a big fan of what little I've read of Steve Skeets. I'm not really a big fan of his writing. And this here, art by Alex Nino, it's very sketchy and delicate, and for me that works in this sort of old school pirate strip, because it really evokes the work of like the old school cartoonists and artists that were doing comic strips when adventure strips were big, like in the 30s and 40s. So there's sort of a Hal Foster sort of sketchiness to the art that I think really works for this sort of thing. And it's a sort of throwback to the original adventure comics. So you get, I just blanked on the guy's name. They had a captain there, Captain Blood. I forget. Anyway, it just sort of harkens back. So I really like the art. I would give the art probably a 3.5. I'd like to give it a 4. But because it's so delicate, I don't think it reproduces very well in the printing here. It's not really the artist's fault. It's more the technology of the time. I have a feeling if that art were remastered today, it would look better because they'd be able to retain that delicateness and it would really come out. In terms of the story, I'll give that a solid 3.5. I did enjoy the story. Have to knock the writing a little bit again because there's no recap. You have no idea what's going on if you just read this by itself. The other two are self-contained. This, as an ongoing serial, there needs to be at least a blurb at the beginning to let you know what's happening at the start, but it starts like mid-scene with her holding him at gunpoint, and that to me is a mistake on the part both of Steve Skeets but also editor Joe Orlando. I think they needed to tighten that up a little bit. But I like it. And in terms of the concept, I give it a solid 4. There's nothing like an old-fashioned pirate strip, but having the twist where Captain Fear is apparently one of the natives who has taken over one of these ships in the Caribbean. I don't know if he is South American or Incan or Mayan or something. That he kind of looks that way from his garb, but that's a really interesting twist. I think that could be really cool. So I think a well done sort of pirate series with a character. He's got a cool name, Captain Fear. I dig it. I think it could be good. Now, one thing I wanted to mention, this is kind of a side note, but the letter column in here is hilarious because it's got feedback from issue 425, the first issue of this adventure new look old look with the adventure stories, and the stuff in here is hilarious to read how absolutely crazy the readers at the time were, because like for instance here, let's see if I can find this. Captain Fear will never make it, especially with that poor artwork. I don't know. I think Alex Nino is actually really good. And then there's a great comment in here if I can find it. Oh, here it is. The Wings of a Jealous God was quite good. The story by Lynn Marin was well thought out, and Alex Toth's layouts were superb, even though he must learn to use more detail. He's improving, though. So, yeah. So Richard Morrissey from Framingham, Maine, has decided to write in and say that Alex Toth, his art is not quite up to snuff because it's not detailed enough, but at least he's getting better. Now, in my opinion, Alex Toth is arguably the best comic book artist of all time. I know that's a little hyperbole, perhaps, and catch me on a different day, I might say someone else. But as I've mentioned on my channel before, my big 3 artists are Alex Toth, Harry Lucy, and the person who combines both of them into one amazing package, Darwin Cook. And so to read these things that are like, man, that Alex Toth guy, he's just not good enough. All of these comments about the artwork not being up to snuff just makes me feel like the people were very used to sort of mainstream, which, at the time, like Neil Adams was the hot thing. And if you look at Neil Adams' art compared to Alex Toth, yeah, he's like, it's not detailed enough. It's not supposed to be detailed. I'm not going to go on a rant. I just wanted to share that because it's so goofy. So what do I think overall? Again, we're giving a 4.5 to the cover. When I look at the art as a whole, I think it's very strong. You can't go wrong with the Jim Aparo art in the first story. It's excellent. The Mike Sekowsky art in the second is very, very different. And again, it is an acquired taste, and not everyone's going to like it because he isn't really concerned with making his characters look attractive. He's concerned with imbuing all the figures with energy. And so there's a lot of energy in everyone's poses and stuff. And just the sketchy sort of line work, it's very, very frenetic, and not everyone likes that, but I am a fan of his. I've read enough Sekowsky at this point, between his Wonder Woman and his Supergirl and some of the other books he was doing at this time, to really appreciate Sekowsky's art. So I'm a big fan of that. And Alex Nino, I think his art is excellent in the back. It just suffers from being a little too delicate for the printing quality, particularly with the coloring over his line work, sort of washes things out. So overall, I'm going to give the art a 4. I'm going to give it a 4 overall. I think that the Jim Aparo art and the Sekowsky art are strong enough to sort of bring up the issues with the art from Nino. Stories, less excited about the stories. I think the best I can possibly do is a 3 for the stories. The basic plots were fine, but the first one, as I mentioned, it was basically the resolution didn't actually build off of anything from the setup, and so that's just a fundamental storytelling problem. The vigilante story was fine, but too cramped, and the Captain Fear, just from a script, if you gave me just the plots of these, I would say the Captain Fear is the best of them, but it made the mistake of not explaining what the heck was going on, so you just spend the first half of the story totally confused trying to catch up with what's happening. So yeah, I think a 3 is the best I can do. Concept, I'm going to give the concept for the whole book, the idea of going back to the adventure style. Actually, I love it. So I'm going to give the overall concept a 4. The only reason I don't go 5 with it is that is basically I think the reason that they only did 3 issues of it is that the market at that time wasn't that forgiving for books that didn't have a very, very strong central concept. Now, this is adventure comics, and so you should, when you read it, expect to get adventure. But if you look at something like their horror titles or their, Weird Western, Weird War, you know exactly what you're gonna get just from like the basic concept. With this, adventure is such a broad idea that I don't think they quite nail it in terms of being able to easily market this to the audience. If you saw this on the shelf, you might get it because the cover's so cool, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking for what the content is. So you might get it and then be a little bit puzzled. And I think that's something. It's a tricky problem for them, but I think they could have drilled down a little bit more. Vigilante feels a little bit out of place. He actually is on the cover of the previous issue, so I don't know. As much as I love this, I can't give it a 5 because it just was a little bit off. But I do have a soft spot for stuff like this. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4. So my overall score for the book, everything being all told, I want to give it a 4 overall. But I think I can only go 3.5 because of the weakness of the story. So if you take all my grades together, they're going to average out somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4. I'm going to round down. I'm going to give this issue reluctantly a 3.5. I want to give it a 4, but the best I can do for my overall grade, 3.5. Still, I love this 3-issue run. I wish it had continued, even though the Black Orchid issues are really interesting and weird, and then the Spectre issues, of course, are classics. There's just something about the old school adventure that just really hits the sweet spot. So there it is. Thanks very much for watching. I hope this has been interesting. Again, I encourage everyone to check out Metarog's channel. Check out the channels of all the other people doing the graders notes. I've linked everyone's things down below so you can check all that stuff out for yourself. And if you go to Metarog's channel, he's got links to all sorts of other YouTubers. So there's a whole world out there of comic book YouTubers. They each have their own different style, a little niche and stuff. And so hopefully this will lead you to find some more other YouTubers that you like. So, and if you like this, of course, feel free to subscribe. I've got a doohickey here. I've got some other videos you can watch. And thanks very much.